In the year 1867, after a dramatic inner-German war, a new great state emerged that would shape the history of the continent, and especially Germany, to this day: the North German Confederation. For the first time, Bismarck succeeded in creating a German power bloc from the mosaic of small kingdoms and duchies, which was considered one of the most progressive states of the time. It not only had what was probably the strongest military of the time, but it also established numerous democratic elements and laid the foundation for our current federal order. So what was this state all about? How did the North German Confederation come into being? How powerful was it in reality? And how did it lead to the final German unification and the founding of the German Empire? We will explore all these exciting questions in today's video. Enjoy. Up until the 19th century, the area of today's Germany was far from being a unified nation-state. Instead, it was a fragmented landscape of kingdoms, duchies, principalities, and free cities. This political fragmentation was a legacy of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, which was dissolved in the year 1806. The Napoleonic Wars ushered in the end of the Great Empire and led to the reorganization of territorial structures in Europe. Thus, after the Congress of Vienna in the year 1815, the German Confederation was established, a loose confederation of states consisting of 39 sovereign German states. This confederation served as a political structure for coordination among the member states, but was very limited in its effectiveness and could not provide effective unity or a central government for Germany. And so, throughout the 19th century, nationalist movements grew, calling for the unification of the German states under a single national identity. This movement was driven partly by cultural and partly by political factors. In this context, Prussia, one of the most powerful German states, assumed a leading role. Under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian Prime Minister, Prussia sought to unite the German states under its leadership. But Prussia had another competitor, Austria. Austria also saw itself in a leadership role and wanted to unite the German states under its flag. And so, the differences between the two leading powers inevitably led to a war that would decide the future fate of the German-speaking regions. The so-called German War of 1866 became the turning point. For with Prussia's victory, not only was the weak German Confederation dissolved, but it also allowed Bismarck to further advance his plan to create a German national state dominated by Prussia. Bismarck deliberately provoked the war as he saw it as the best way to develop a sense of unity among the German states. Additionally, he skillfully isolated Austria from its allies and secured the neutrality of other European powers such as France and Russia. Thus, Prussia was able to demonstrate its clear military superiority and win the conflict in a relatively short time. Austria had to agree in the subsequent peace treaty to withdraw from all future German affairs, paving the way for German unification under Prussian leadership. And so, in the year 1867, the North German Confederation was founded, a union of all North German states and an important step toward final German unity. But let's take a closer look at the North German Confederation in detail. Overall, the North German Confederation comprised 22 states, which later became federal states within the Confederation. These ranged from larger kingdoms like Saxony and Hanover to smaller duchies like Brunswick and city-states like Hamburg. It covered an area of over 400,000 square kilometers, making it significantly larger than present-day Germany, and a total of 30 million people already lived there at that time. The state had a very federal structure, making it very similar to today's Germany. Bismarck promoted a sensible balance between central decisions at the federal level and the preservation of autonomy for the individual states. and the federal structure of the North German Confederation served as a model for the later German Empire. While important key areas such as foreign policy, defense, and trade were regulated at the federal level, the member states retained their sovereignty in numerous domestic matters such as education or local legislation. However, power was not equally distributed, as Prussia held a dominant position within the Confederation. The Prussian king was also the federal president, and the Prussian prime minister, primarily Otto von Bismarck, served as federal chancellor. This arrangement strengthened Prussia's influence on federal policy and gave the state a leading role in the new federal system. The constitution created two legislative chambers, the Federal Council and the Reichstag, both of which remain a legacy that we still see in federal politics today. The Federal Council consisted of representatives from the individual federal states, with Prussia holding the most votes. The Reichstag, the parliament, was elected by men through general, direct, and secret elections and was intended to represent the people. These were quite progressive democratic developments for the time. Nevertheless, we should not be deceived, as the state was still a constitutional monarchy in which the Prussian federal president and chancellor held most of the power. Even the important military and foreign policy matters were entirely under Prussian control. All member states were obliged to place their armed forces under Prussian command. Moreover, military expenditures accounted for 95% of the total budget at that time. This gave the Prussian leadership ample funds to modernize the army, introduce new weapons technologies, and improve military training and organization. For Bismarck was already planning the next war, yet there were also many progressive developments in terms of civil rights. The new constitution, formulated by Bismarck, granted certain fundamental rights, such as freedom of the press and freedom of association. It also laid the foundation for a unified legal system and promoted legal harmonization in the German territories. A key piece of economic integration was the creation of a common customs union. This enabled free trade between the member states by eliminating customs barriers. Bismarck also designated the black-white-red tricolor, a combination of the Hanseatic white-red with the Prussian black-white, as the national emblem of the North German Confederation. And thus, with the founding of the North German Confederation, a new power bloc had emerged in Central Europe. The establishment of the new state caused particular concern in France, which only very reluctantly recognized it. At that time, Bismarck assured the French Emperor Napoleon III that the unification efforts would remain limited to the area north of the Main River. Nevertheless, he kept a back door open. He immediately concluded secret protection and defense alliances with the southern German states, whose troops would be placed under the command of the Prussian king in the event of war. And it was precisely this loophole that Bismarck would exploit just a few years later. For in reality, the North German Confederation would only exist for 5 years. Bismarck skillfully maneuvered France into declaring war. At that time, Prussia and France were arguing over the succession to the Spanish throne. Wilhelm I sent a dispatch to Berlin, informing Bismarck about the talks with the French envoy. However, Bismarck sharply reworded the rather harmless content of this so-called Ems dispatch and sent it to the press. As a result, France appeared as a humiliated nation, which Napoleon III could not tolerate, leading him to declare war on the North German Confederation. The trap had sprung. Now, all of Bismarck's carefully prepared mechanisms came into play. Prussia activated the secret protection treaties, bringing all southern German states into the war alongside the North German Confederation. A sense of national unity emerged like never before. Together, the German states ultimately won the Franco-Prussian War. And after the war, Bismarck once again used skillful diplomacy to convince the southern German states of unification. Thus, on the 18th of January 1871, the German Empire was proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, and Wilhelm